Hi all, welcome to the September CalsComm workshop. Today we're going to be talking about crafting impactful student stories. CalsComm workshops are a series that help bring trending and updated topics to the CALS community. We include all employees as well as students are welcome to attend these. So keep coming back if you're enjoyed today. And we also have the arsenal of previous CalComm workshop videos on our YouTube link that I'll share in later resources. So today we have Crystal Lynch presenting. She is the Marketing and Communication Specialist for Academic Programs. Her work focuses on marketing and communication strategies for wellness, career services, recruiting, and more. She also writes stories for CALS News and the internal employee website and maintains several CALS web pages. In her spare time, Crystal is an amateur web designer and part-time dance teacher. I'm curious about that dance teacher bit, Crystal. I love dance. So please, thank you for joining us today and take it away.
All right, thank you so much, Janine. Welcome, Cole and Dylan. Yeah, thanks for coming to this workshop. I'm excited to share with you some of my strategies and some of the things that I do to help craft impactful student stories. So yes, we're going to learn about how to identify stories that resonate with readers, showcasing the college's impact. We're going to learn about identifying students with unique experiences, accomplishments, and perspectives, learning how to create an emotional connection with diverse audiences, and how to conduct interviews, source gathering, and then I'm going to bless you guys with some shared files that you can use when you're writing your own stories. So let's go ahead and get started. Get this thing to work. Okay, that's me. That's my email, my phone number. I'll be honest, like I rarely am here in the office. I'm here in the office like once a week, so email is probably the best way to get in touch with me. What you'll learn, we just kind of talked about what you'll learn. And I'm hoping that it will be practical, actionable, and relevant to the work that you do. And I actually just talked about all of this. I'm sorry, this is like my first time doing a presentation, but yes. So we're going to talk again about, identifying student stories, creating that connection, how to conduct interviews, and creating a story outline that you can use for all of your projects. So this is interesting. Right now on the CALS website, there are over 400 stories in CALS News that are student-focused stories. Who are our students? This is just a snapshot of our incoming first-year class. And this does not include AGI members or transfer students, but this is a snapshot of first-year students. So you can see the numbers here, overwhelmingly female, which is really interesting, which I did not realize. Most of the students are in-state, and we have quite a few first-generation status students. And then if you look over here, like rural counties, 45 rural counties are represented in this new class. And we also have some international students, 6 international students, but 7 countries overall represented, being China, Colombia, Israel, Japan, South Korea, and of course the US. So that's just kind of like an idea of who our student body is, at least like this, this first year cohort. So the power of student stories. Student stories, and just stories in general, I believe, shape the world that we envision. And here's an interesting quote: "Storytelling is the most powerful way to put ideas into the world." So I believe that the world that we want to see, we can shape it by the stories that we tell. So I found that in the Power Student Stories, good student stories will highlight the quality of education and the variety of experiences that Cal students can access while they're here. These stories help us connect with diverse audiences, including parents, alumni, industry leaders, and educators. Our stories should communicate with our audiences what the mission and vision is of CALS and how that mission and vision manifests in our students while they're here at school and beyond. We also want these stories to contribute to the college's reputation and stakeholder engagement. And so I have an example here of a student story that I had just put out. The student's name is Hunter Williams, and he participated in an internship this past summer at Coastal Agribusiness, which is a company that specializes in agribusiness, farming solutions, precision agriculture, various types of products and services for farmers. And Hunter is an AGI student. And while he was working at Coastal Agribusiness, the one thing that really stood out to me while I was talking with him, and I felt like was something that he really took away with, was the value of customer service. This is also an interesting story to Coastal Agribusiness because they have a really deep partnership with CALS, and a lot of interns that work at Coastal during the summer end up becoming employees at this company. So not only do we have Hunter, but both of his supervisors, or his one supervisor, and then I think the one operations manager, all of them are, both of them are CALS alum, and the operations manager is an AGI alum as on top of that. So it's really interesting. So we actually have 3 generations of interns working at this company. So Williams he is currently still a student. He's earning his associate's degree in agribusiness management through AGI. One interesting thing about this student is, and going back to the customer service angle, is that he was assigned to drive out to a customer's farm because they were having problems with their equipment, their tractor. And the type of training and the work that he was doing at Coastal enabled him to go out to this customer, fix the part that was not working correctly. And then the farmer was able to finish their work. So basically they were planting soybeans, and not having that part working correctly obviously was going to impact their work that day. It was going to impact their productivity. So this student was able to go out, I believe he went out by himself as well, fix the part, and got that customer back on track with planting the soybeans. So one thing that stood out with Hunter, again, was the element of customer service, learning that on the job, learning that as an intern, and that being actually an inspiration for him when he goes out and he graduates and he goes into the workforce. One of the things that he said was that, I feel like I am equipped to provide the type of customer service that I learned from my colleagues and from this experience at Coastal Agribusiness. And again, this is a great example too of stakeholder engagement, in that they have Coastal Agribusiness actually has a scholarship program through CALS. Hunter is not a scholarship recipient in particular, but there are scholarship recipients working at Coastal right now. And so they have that relationship with CALS. And so it's great because in this quote here from Josh, who is the director of operations at Coastal, he says that the university provides students with, NC State provides students with opportunity to create professional networks. Nobody does it better than NC State, and Coastal, that really is their feeling, like they have that great relationship with NC State. So I think showing those types of stories shows that impact. It shows that connection between the student experience, what types of students that we're producing at CALS, and then the experience that they have in their internship, being able to equip them for their future career, and then also building those relationships with our industry partners and stakeholders. And it looks like there's a, oh, thank you, Dylan. I just read your chat. Okay. So what to look for in identifying impactful student stories? They should highlight CAL's mission and values. And part of CAL's mission and values would be training students become leaders and to meet the needs of our agriculture, food, and life science industries. Also, equipping students to solve problems that bring knowledge to our diverse communities across the state, our nation, and the world. These stories should highlight the important work and research that CAL students are doing, and they should illustrate engaging experiences and accomplishments and perspectives. So this is a pretty special story. Jasmine Gibson, it's kind of interesting. And I'm going to go into this a little bit later about how to find student stories. And this was just kind of like a serendipitous, like, type of connection. I went to one of our ODI Conversations That Matters workshops, and Jasmine Gibson was a student who was presenting, and she was talking about food, like sustainability, permaculture, farming practices. It was really, really interesting. And it actually was perfect timing for Earth Month. So this came out, I believe, in April, which is Earth Month. But anyway, the kind of work that she's doing, Jasmine is a grad student here at CALS. And she is transforming this kind of grassy area in between the Weaver Laboratories at the VAE department. She's transforming this into this active educational space that's promoting urban horticulture and farming practices. So actually, she started out as a BAE student. So the biological and agricultural engineering student, but then she moved to horticulture. That's where she is now. But she stayed connected with the BAE group, and she saw a need with that community, and thought of ways to make that happen. So through one of the classes that she took, she, along with her classmates, designed garden space that would serve many needs. One being a teaching space for the BAE department, an outreach space to host and educate members of the Raleigh community doing outreach, and then also a model to showcase permaculture practices, and also a space to help enhance the mental health and well-being of BAE students. So I could just, let me just click on this real quick and I can show you kind of like the layout of, can you guys still see my screen? You can? Okay. Just making sure. I kind of wish, and this is a WordPress thing, but anyway, I wish that there was like a way to maximize this picture. But anyway, this picture right here, if you can see it, it's pretty small on my screen, but this is the plan that Jasmine came up with to transform that space into this really living, vibrant space for students, again, for like educational purposes, and also to help with just the mental health, well-being, a place of respite for students, in between classes to, hang out, get a little space, breathe as well. So there's like a serenity garden here, a pollinator garden. There's going to be like a tiny farm, a vegetable garden. So this space is doing a whole lot of things, but I think it's really great that, this student had this vision to create this type of space that she hopes to be able to duplicate in other areas. So let's go back here. And one also pretty cool thing that came out of this story is that Jasmine was she was contacted by Bob Patterson, who is like one of the most famous professors on campus, and she was invited to do a guest lecture at one of his classes for first-year students. I believe it's the Exploratory Studies course, which she did a couple of weeks ago. So, you know, not only is she doing great work for students in the community, but then, you know, other people are seeing the kind of work that she's doing. And I think that's the power of storytelling. Not only we're showing like what it is that she's doing to contribute to the community, but then other people are seeing what she's doing and then wanting to involve her in their endeavors as well. So I thought that was great. I'm really happy.
Crystal, the imagery that you found here is stunning. Like the cover photo of her, even that little tiny map, like you said, is super cool. This bit photo is incredible.
Yes, thank you to university photographers. Thank you to Mark Hall, who did a great job. This is a great quote. There's always room for a story that can transport people to another place. So another type of impactful story would be study abroad. I think those are always great. They do great on social. People love to see students going about, you know, traveling to different countries, having new experiences. So one story that I worked on was animal science major Beatrice Eddy, who went to South Africa, where she learned about South African culture. She went with I think it's the South African Wildlife Management and Conservation. That was the course where they get hands-on experience with African wildlife and their habitat. They perform various types of veterinary services for the different types of animals out there, wild dogs, rhinos. In the picture, I think there's like I'm not sure what that is. Looks like some kind of a deer. I don't know why it's blurry, but anyway, hopefully it's not blurry on your end, but it's blurry on my end. So yeah, those types of experiences I think do really, really well. Another interesting experience that she had was practicing darting, which is a way of immobilizing large animals that are basically hard to handle or hard to catch. It is a humane method. Right now, she's not shooting at any animal in this picture. I think she's aiming at some kind of like inanimate object on the ground, but this is one of the experiences that she got to have while she was there. Another really interesting story is Jessie Klein, who I believe has graduated, but she went to Ireland and she was studying honeybees. She actually was like kind of like an entrepreneur. She learned about beekeeping from her grandfather, started her own beekeeping business, and then it kind of translated to this trip to Ireland, which would not be like my first, I guess, you know, guess that Ireland and honeybees would be, you know, related to each other. But she did have some research that she was wanting to do there. And her study abroad project involved research paper comparing contrasting beekeeping practices between Ireland and the US. And specifically, she was studying the European dark bee, which is a specific type of bee that actually is able to thrive in the Irish climate. And there's Jessie. So how do we find these types of stories? Honestly, it's pretty, for me, it's not super hard to do. For one thing you want to consider your department's communications plan. If your department has a communications plan, consider what that plan is, what types of stories that it is that you want to tell. And then you might want to also consider your editorial needs. Like, what do you have planned out for the month? Is there a certain month that you want to create certain content for? Or it doesn't have to be planned on a month. It could just be whatever your priorities are. So those types of things will kind of help, for one, guide like what kind of stories that you want to actually pursue. And then once you understand that, then you need to know, well, where can I go to find these stories? So one that I do is just ask my colleagues, hey, you know, I work with communications. We have a content team. So we meet every week and we discuss story ideas. And, you know, if someone has like, you know, an idea or has an idea for a story, but it's not really quite where to start, you know, everyone can jump in and say, hey, have you tried this? Have you tried that? Have you asked this person? Have you asked that person? Ask faculty. Faculty, of course, work with students all the time, so they know what students are doing. They know what kind of research that they're working on. They know, you know, who might have a really interesting story, who might have interesting backstory. You know, maybe they came from a place of, you know, some difficulty or some hardship, and they've overcome some challenges. That can also be a really great story as well. One thing you can also do is attend events with students in it. And that's basically how I met Jasmine. But then just recently we had and I'm going to click on this, hope you can see this. We had the first annual research internship and research experience symposium. All these students that did great work over the summer, either in internships or in research programs, and they presented their work at this symposium, where the top three students won prizes. So, you know, go where the students are, you know, talk to the students, see what there is that they're up to. You know, you just never really know what you might find, but sometimes you just kind of have to get out there and find it. So let's talk a little bit about elements of an impactful student story. I believe that these types of stories, they showcase personal and academic growth through challenges and achievements. They can highlight the college's efforts to connect with all students. And they also incorporate some relatable elements, emotions and human experiences that everybody goes through. So one example I have here, academic growth would be a student, he's a PhD student. He might have graduated by now. I'm not quite sure, but anyway, Camilo H. Parada Rojas. He's an international doctoral student from Colombia. He's also a Rocky Farr Fellow. So the interesting thing to me about his story was, you know, being an international student, that's already pretty interesting because you're coming from a different culture. Also the aspect of mentorship that he had with his professor, and also the professional development that he experienced through the Farr Fellows program. And one thing I thought was really interesting in part of that professional development was that there was a media training that he went through where he had to talk to a journalist or a reporter about certain type of research that he was working on. And so he would basically, it was kind of like a mock interview or like a mock, you know, type of situation with media. And then he would get feedback about, you know, how he did or how that story was actually perceived. So it's interesting, it's a way of, you know, taking kind of like this scientific, you know, this highly specific type of information and then communicating this in a way that the general public would be able to understand and learning how to do that effectively. So I think they went through a couple of different trials with this. You know, they would, you know, go through the interview with the journalist or the media person, the media professional, get feedback, and then kind of keep going until they were able to like understand how to effectively communicate that type of research. And in a way that is true to what it is that they wanted to communicate, so that, you know, sometimes, and I think, you know, with research, it can, if it's not explained correctly, it can be misunderstood or misconstrued. So that was part of that training that he took, which I thought was pretty interesting. Also, you know, connections. So how does university connect with its students? Not all students are on campus. Some students are far away. We have Michelle Case, who is a distance education student who lives in New York. So she's never stepped foot on NC State's campus, as far as I know. At least when I had interviewed her. She's done all of her work distance. And she's actually one of two students in this distance education program for agricultural education. She's an older student. She's a mother, and she also works full time. So she is completely a non-traditional student. And I thought that's what made her story very interesting, was the balancing of her family life with her work life, and then also being a student. And it's interesting too, is that how she was able to find NC State was that NC State was really the only school that had the kind of program that she wanted. And she found it at, I believe it was an FFA convention. So she had just happened to find the booth and realize, okay, this is what I need to do. So great experience for her. I think the story also shows that, education can be applied to any stage of life, whether you're working full-time, a parent, far away in another state, you can still access education. And with our distance education program, we show that, just that education is accessible. We're trying to make it accessible to everybody. Let's see what else. So, and then the aspect of the connection. So of course she's distance education. So there is that kind of like that lack of connection, or that struggle, that challenge there. But, she talked about how the professors would make that effort to connect with her. Even something as simple as one of her professors mailing her a sticker in the mail, but that really actually stood out to her, and that made her feel connected to the university. So I thought that was a really interesting story. The other next interesting story would be Kimberly Hernandez, who is not technically an international student. She's from Puerto Rico, but she had some challenges, making a transition to life in North Carolina, NC State, language barrier issues, just cultural issues, and then finding community. I think she's also a really good example of switching your focus. So we know that, sometimes students will come into college with a goal. I want to do this, I want to do that, I want to major in this, I want to major in that. And they may end up changing that along the way. Kimberly is one of those. She wanted to study, she wanted to become a veterinarian, but she ended up actually switching to wanting to pursue animal science education instead. And that worked out well for her. She had some certain difficulties. She was dealing with cultural adjustments, being a native Puerto Rican, so there were language barriers. There was actually fielding kind of what might be considered insensitive types of comments and questions from her peers, and having to deal with those types of things. But also understanding as well that, most of the types of questions she would get from her peers, they were well-meaning. And it just really just showed that there was, again, that cultural divide. And even on, our end, some lack of education that unfortunately a lot of Americans, we kind of sometimes live in a bubble and don't understand, how other people live in other countries. But I thought that the way Kimberly expressed that and handled that was really, really graceful. Also, her finding community as well. So finding community through other Latinx organizations on campus, through the Multicultural Student Affairs Office. She worked closely with Juntos. And for her, that was really a life-changing moment for her, that helped her to find her path as far as working more closely with the Latinx community, and specifically with high school students, to help them actually graduate high school and increase enrollment in colleges. Does anybody have any questions so far, or any comments?
I'm loving the layout of all of this.
Oh, Well, yeah, thanks to Patty for her nice template that she put together.
No, I mean like the way that you organized it.
Oh, thank you. Thank you.
Yeah, I'm enjoying your presentation. I was curious, I mean, once we maybe try to get one of these kinds of stories put together, like, and if we need pictures and things like that, will somebody at the university be glad or willing to help? That's my first question.
Right. So I work with and Cal's Communications worked with we work with university photographers. So mostly I work with Becky Kirkland and Mark Hall. So if you have, a budget for photography, those would be the ones I would work with. I mean, they do excellent work. Um, sometimes students will have images of their own, like especially the study abroad students, because obviously we can't go to South Africa or Ireland with them to take pictures, but students a lot of times will source their own images as well, and those can be pretty good. I mean, of course you have to pick and choose, but they usually provide some pretty good things that we can use. So I've even at times I've gone out and just taken a few pictures myself. I am no photographer, but every once in a while, if you're in a crunch, if you feel like your skills are up to par, then that's also an option. But my first option would be, university photographers, and then also sourcing images from your student or your subject.
Okay, and my second question was, like, once you have all this put together, is there like, I mean, you just ask at your departmental level, or who wants to publish this story or get this story out there?
Right. So, at Cal's Communications, of course we have Cal's News where we publish that directly. I'm not exactly sure how departments, and can you tell me where are you? Like, where
So
does
I'm in the food bioprocessing and nutrition science department.
Okay. Okay. And would you be responsible for writing the story, or would you like have the story idea and then would you be like submitting it to?
And we've done that, and I was a journalism minor in college, so I've always written some as I've gone. So I was just kind of, I'm glad to put, some short things together and get them edited, obviously. But yeah, just, I'm an advisor. I work closely with students, so you see a lot of things that feel worthy of reporting. So just trying to, get those stories put somewhere where they'll get heard.
Right. Well, you know what, at the end, and let me make sure I'm to remind myself of this. We actually do have a form. So if you have a story, like say you don't want to write it yourself, we have a form that you can submit to Cal's Communications that we can that will take story ideas. So let me let me just find it right now.
I'll find it, Crystal. You keep going, I'll find it.
Okay, great. Okay, thank you.
Sorry to slow you down. Thank you.
No, thank you. Thanks for the question. Let's move on. Okay, interviewing students. All right, how do you get students talking? Well, I find, for one, when I reach out to students, or if I'm recommending a student, then usually that person has been identified either by like a staff member or a colleague or faculty member who knows that this student has like an interesting story to tell. Some students, they talk a lot, they have a lot to say, and some students are very modest, and it takes a little bit more to kind of like get the story out of them. But I feel like it's important to allow students to share their stories authentically, share them in their own voice. And I do try to, when I write stories about students, try to make sure that their voice is included, with direct quotes and the way that they would say something. Of course, you don't want to put like slang or whatever like that. Obviously you're going to edit and everything like that, but we do want to make sure that student voice is heard. In interviewing students, always asking open-ended questions, that's helpful. Actively listening, following up if there's you know, if they answer a question kind of briefly, you can always follow up with, and how did that make you feel? Or, you know, what was the result of this? You know, there's different ways that you can kind of pry that out of your student. And I'm going to have a resource for you, some sample interview questions that will help with that. Also, you know, respecting privacy and sensitivities, making sure that students are being referred to in the way that they choose to be referred to. So that could be, you know, pronouns, it could be, you know, whatever ethnicity categories that they want to use for themselves, making sure that, you know, we respect those decisions. So just some sample interview questions that I like to ask. You know, what was the most surprising thing about, it could be an internship experience, it could be a class, it could be, you know, a study abroad, you know, what was the most surprising thing to you about, you know, X country? Those are always generate some really interesting responses. What particular moment or memory stands out for you? That's a good way to pull out, like, you know, secondary types of stories. What achievement or contribution are you most proud of? I like to ask this one because, and I think this one actually was a good one in the story about Hunter Williams, who's a very modest young man. But when I asked him this question, that was when he told me the story about the client or the customer's tractor breaking down and him having to go out and replace that part. I don't think I would have gotten that story if I hadn't asked him this question. And then one question that I always like to ask everybody is, what inspires you? Because I really like to get to, you know, what is the heart of the person? You know, what is it that makes this person tick? Like, who is this person? And I feel like I'm just interested I'm interested in people, and I'm interested in how people think and how people act. And, you know, what is like your core, I don't want to say core mission, but like, what is at the heart? What is at the heart of this soul that you're talking to? So I always ask what inspires you, because, you know, you will tend to get some really interesting answers. So that's the interviewing process. And in general, when I interview students, it is via Zoom, and Zoom is great because I can record and have a direct transcript of, you know, of the conversation, and it also helps me get direct quotes. So Zoom is always wonderful. Most of my interviews are conducted that way, but sometimes you got a lot going on. You're busy, the student's busy, and you just need to get something, okay? That has happened to me a few times. Some of them with the Hispanic Heritage Month, I had to get some stories in. I was busy, I had a lot of stuff going on. I created a form. The form was great. And actually, I think in some ways, students kind of liked it better, because then they were able to kind of answer questions on their own time, without having, like, you know, feeling pressured to, you know, come up with something on the fly. Even though I will say, I usually always when I interview students, I always send them questions ahead of time so they're prepared. But even then, sometimes people are busy, and having a form that students can fill out is kind of nice. So I've done this a couple of times with much success for some of the students who were of Hispanic heritage, and those students, when I did those interviews for Hispanic Heritage Month or Latinx Heritage Month, and then also for some of my study abroad students. So this is just a sample of a form. I wanted to share it with you guys, but for some reason I'm not able to share. It, but I'll figure it out. and if I figure it out, I'll send this to you. But this is kind of a sample of a form that you could create, where it just has some questions. These are a lot of questions. I might not have like this many questions. But I feel like students kind of like it. I think especially the ones who are a little more on the introverted side and may not be as comfortable speaking, you know, face-to-face or even on Zoom. This is great for them because it gives them time to think and really write out some really thoughtful responses. And I've used this to great effect, and you can always go back and ask them for clarification. And I've never had a problem with students, you know, being able to clarify, you know, some of the things that they talk about.
Crystal, do you customize it for each like series that you're doing so that it's kind of different per whatever you're trying to get at?
Yeah, I do. So I have a list of questions that that Janine can share with you, and I do customize them. So before I go into the interview, I make sure that I know, what the student's major is, what their year is. Hopefully I can get that information from, the faculty member or the staff member who, I had spoken to previously. And then knowing a little bit more about like what their internship was or what program it is that they're involved in. I will try to customize the questions to tailor it to that. And then I always have like some follow-up questions just in case those questions don't go well. Then I have like maybe 2 or 3 other questions I can ask that will kind of help bring more of the story out. But yeah, that's a good point. Like I do try to customize all of my questions. So yeah, we're getting down to the end. So again, some resources for you that, Janine, are you able to share those links?
Yes,
Okay.
I'll drop them in the chat.
Okay, great. Thanks.
And then I'll also send them out with the video.
Oh, okay, good. Good. So this is the interview questions that I usually use when I'm interviewing students. And then I have some other, other types of questions here at the bottom that kind of help like really flesh out a story if you wanted to go that deep into it. Usually I don't actually tend to use these as much, but I pretty much tend to stick to these types of questions here at the top. I usually try and ask no more than 10 questions. I think anything over 10 it just starts to get like kind of long and want people to get like kind of fatigued, when they're, just think about when you go to a job interview, like when people ask you millions of questions, after a while, you're just kind of like, okay, right? So I try to keep it, between like 8 to 10 questions, maybe 11, if, one of the questions didn't really get the answer that I was looking for. That's really helpful. Also, I also can share with you guys like a story outline template. So I'm not really getting into the nuts and bolts of actually like writing the story, but this is something that I have used and I continue to use to help just structure my stories. A lot of this I actually got from this really cool book called, I believe it's called, oh God, I think it's Master Content Marketing. And in that book, the author talks about writing out all of your headlines. Like, I think she actually advises you to write out like 20 different headlines. Once you know kind of like what the topic is, or after you've kind of at least thought about what the idea of the story is. And so I will write all those out, starting here at number 1. And eventually one of those headlines is going to end up being the title, or some of those headlines could end up being like a subheading or what have you. This is kind of tailored for the WordPress platform. So I always make sure that I put my categories in, my tags in, whatever those happen to be, an excerpt for the article. So when it shows up, there's like that little blurb, for the article. And then also the outline. And of course you can tailor this however you need to, your introduction can be longer, it can be shorter. It doesn't have to be structured this way, but this is a good way. Like say if you did have like a word count limit, this is a good way to kind of like, frame your story a little bit. So you're free to use this. And then I also have some additional questions. Sometimes I might add a little bit of background information at the bottom that I can plug in later. So I'll show you what this looks like kind of in practice. Let's see, is this the one? Okay, so this is what that outline looks like in practice. So this was a story that I did for vet camp, summer of 2022, and I interviewed 3 of the vet camp coordinators who learned a lot about leadership during that time as they were helping out with that particular summer camp. So I just talked about the different themes of the story. Here you can see I got to 14 different headlines. I think the bolded ones one of those bolded ones actually became the title. Some of them became like subtitles. So again, even though this is not like a writing workshop, these are just some of the ways that I kind of put together the story after all the interviewing, and I got all that information in. So you can see here, I've got my categories. This was part of Cal Summer Stories, and that was the first Cal Summer Stories in 2022 that we did, the first instance of Cal Summer Stories. So if you go to this tag in the website, you'll find all those stories there. And then for the outline portion, this is basically kind of like where I dump a lot of my information and kind of sort through it this way. So obviously, you know, writing is a messy process, so it can be as messy as it needs to be. But I feel like this framework kind of helps tame the chaos a little bit when I'm actually putting the story out. And that is my presentation, you guys. We can definitely open up for questions, thoughts.
Thanks so much, Crystal.
All right.
I don't know if we want to just hang out for a minute and see if any questions come up, but this was maybe the best organized presentation of all times. So, and I don't just say things to say things, so I really appreciate it. And again, all of the resources here will be available we'll include that. And then this is a little preview of what's next to come. The CALS Magazine 2023 is launching in the middle of October, so be on the lookout. And you can, again, use that story form if there are ideas that of students you know, or of people or activities going on around the college that you think are worth us considering to write about. And then also reach out to Crystal if you have any specific student questions or anything to share about this or regarding this presentation. So thanks everybody for coming. Thanks so much to Crystal, and thanks for joining the September CalsCom workshop.